Hello and welcome to your Python Masterclass with Anaconda. My name is Matthew Dewey, lead instructor at programmingtut.com. I have taught Python programming for 5 years and studied far longer than that. In my experience, Python is an excellent programming language to work with. Not only that, it is one of the best beginner languages as well. If you want to start learning Python, this is the course for you. This first section of the masterclass is comprised of basic lectures that will help you master the fundamentals of Python programming. The next section of the course is the Advanced and OOP studies. We learn more advanced methods and functions, eventually moving on to object-oriented programming. OOP is one of the essential skills of any programmer. With OOP, you can create your own classes and objects which can be reused to your advantage. If you want to excel at programming and work effectively, you will need OOP. And that concludes this introduction. In the next video, we'll be discussing programming support for this course. Hello and welcome to a basic Python course for beginners. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to receive support online. First, let me indicate that Udemy comes with a built-in function that allows you to ask questions. By asking questions, you not only ask the student database, but you ask me as well. I frequently looked at these asked questions and answer many of them. So, if you struggle with a particular section in this course, feel free to leave a question for me to see, and I'll no doubt answer it. The second way you can seek support is through Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow is a huge programming reference site that programmers all over the world use to help with their coding. To access Stack Overflow, you simply Google it, but what we're going to do is look for Stack Overflow for Python. So we type in Python Stack Overflow. And what appears at the very top is Stack Overflow Asked Questions. As you can see, there are many users asking questions which are being answered within minutes. As you can see here at the top, you can search whatever languages you need information on. You can go for the Info tab, or you can search a specific function, such as Python input. By searching this, you come up with several results which help you find out what input is in Python and how to get it, such as user input and arguments or external commands in Python. Usually the one you're looking for is found at the top. And in this way, Stack Overflow is incredibly useful when dealing with errors in Python. As a beginner in programming, you face many errors, which is why these are the two best options that I can offer you to help you solve them. That concludes this lesson. In the next video, we'll be talking about what is Python. Hello and welcome to your basic Python course for beginners. In this lesson, we'll be talking about the Python programming language. Python is one of the oldest programming languages to date, having first appeared in 1990. However, the most stable release for Python was released this year, 2018, in March. Python brags about advertising 5,000 to 10,000 Python jobs every month, making it a sizable career. Unlike younger programming languages such as Python or C#, Python never took the world by storm, but has been consistently growing over the years. Python has become part of formal education, having been taught in many high schools as not just universities. As such, it is one of the top 3 leading programming languages today. Python is mainly used for web development, although applications of video games even have been created using Python. The language is simple enough to start with, and not only that, it has many uses. Python is broad, stable, and powerful. Python will consistently grow because of this, and its population is loyal enough to design and create more with its powerful language. As far as careers grow, Python developers have one of the highest earning salaries to date, with averages that can easily earn over $100,000 a year. More startup companies make use of Python than any other language, making it the best entrepreneurial language there is. So with this in mind, Python is a great way to make a splash in the programming world. From a personal point of view as a teacher, I first began learning Python in high school. Having studied Python for many years and after my school education, I can say that Python is an excellent language to begin with. It incorporates a lot of the English language and less of programming jargon, making it one of the best languages you can learn as a beginner. To conclude, Python will always be one of the top languages because of its amazing uses and its huge amount of students every year. That concludes this lesson. In the next video, we will learn how to download and install the software we will be using in this course, Anaconda. Hello and welcome to your basic Python course for beginners. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to download and install Anaconda. What you need to do next is go to the very top of your browser and enter in your URL as follows: anaconda.com/downloads. Once you have done that, press enter. You should see the following site, the Download Anaconda distribution. Once here, you have to scroll down and choose your preferred OS. I am using Windows, but if you are using Apple or Linux, you would then click on these two options here. As it stands, I'll be downloading the Windows version. Of course, we'll be downloading the latest version, and we have to of course select our operating system type. Are we using a 32-bit or a 64-bit? To find out which version you are using on your computer, in case you don't know, you go to your Start menu, you right click on Computer and click Properties. You should be presented with this box. This will tell you the specs of your computer, and if you go down to System Type, you can see what type of OS you are using. As you can see, I am using a 64-bit OS. So I'll close the box and download the 64-bit version. It is a sizable download, so take note of how long it will take to finish. Once the installer has finished, you are then to double click on the icon Anaconda ending with the .exe extension. This will begin the installation. You then may receive an administration box such as this, asking if you want to install this program, and I do indeed. I'll then click Run and wait for the setup to begin. Now that the setup has begun, I click Next. Now that the setup has begun, we are to continue by clicking Next. You'll then be presented with a license agreement, to which you will say I agree to continue the installation. This is where the fine details of installation come in, but it is better to follow the recommended by Anaconda. So I'll just say just me, recommended, click Next. Next you are to choose the destination for your Anaconda navigator. You need to make sure you have enough space on your computer, seeing as it is a sizable program, 2.5 gigabytes. Once you have done all of this, you can click Next. You'll then be given more advanced options, to which you'll check the bottom box, register Anaconda as my default Python 3.6, and ignore the top box, seeing as it is not recommended by Anaconda. And as a basic course, you won't be using it anyway. You're then to begin the installation by clicking Install. Once the installation is complete, you click Next. You skip the VS Code, since we're not going to be working with Visual Studio Code. It is just sort of a partnership between Anaconda and Microsoft Visual Studio. But we won't be using it in this course, so skip. And that concludes the installation. To learn more about Anaconda, you can leave these checked or learn how to get started with Anaconda, but you'll learn about all you need in this course, so I'm going to uncheck both of these. In the next video, I'll give you an IDE tour and learn how to create projects. Hello and welcome to your basic Python programming course for beginners. In this video, I'm going to be giving you a tour of Anaconda, Navigator, and the IDE that we'll be using. So let's click on Anaconda Navigator now. At the home, it will contain Jupyter Notebook and Jupyter Lab. But before I click on any of these, I'm going to first go to Community and show you Stack Overflow Python. As stated in the support video I created earlier, you can go to Stack Overflow where you can learn more about code. Specifically, you can click on this link which will take you directly to the Python page in the community. As you can see here, this is a quick shortcut when working with programming if you haven't bookmarked the Stack Overflow site. Once you've returned to home, click Launch on Jupyter Lab, which is what we'll be using for this course. Clicking Launch, it'll open a browser containing the Jupyter Lab launcher. Once here, you get to choose many options that you'll be working with. We'll be working with the notebook as it is a simple interface, especially for a beginner. Clicking on Notebook should give you this. This is going to be our coding page. And just like that, we've created a notebook project which we'll be writing in our Python code. As you can see, it has a tab open here into my files which are on my computer. Scrolling down, you'll notice our project is contained here. This is an easy way for you to navigate to where your project is being stored on your computer. For now, however, I'm going to click the Files tab, so we just have the code to work with. There are many parts of the program that we're going to be working with in this basic course. First, let me show you where you can save. You could save by pressing Ctrl S or clicking on the Save Notebook Contents over here. So just like that, we've simply saved our program. However, if we don't want our program to be labeled as untitled, we can go to File, Save Notebook As, and we can name our project. For now, I'm going to call this project the Test Project, seeing as we're just testing out our Python. For now, I'm going to label this project as our Test Project and click Save. Notice, however, that this isn't a true Python file. This is a Python interface notebook file. A Python file is .py, while this is our .pynb. To make it into a true Python file, we'll need to go to File, Export Notebook As, Executable Script. Doing so will download your script into a Python file, as you can see here, py. However, since we'll be working with the notebook, let me show you one more thing before I conclude this tour. Go to your settings and choose your Jupyter theme. As you can see, by choosing dark, it is a less stark theme, allowing for better viewing, especially for you as a student. Again, this is infinitely useful as a programmer as well, as you don't want to be staring at a bright screen for so long. This allows for more time on programming, which is a lot better when it comes to efficiency with programming. And there you have project creation and the IDE tour. And that concludes this section. In the next section, we'll begin coding, starting off with our first line of code. Hello and welcome to your basic Python programming course for beginners. In this video, I'm going to be showing you your first line of code. The first line of code, as in any programming language when studying, is known as the Hello World line of code. This is because the first line is designed for a programmer to print a simple text, Hello World. What we're going to do is create just that with the first line of code. We go to our input bar over here, which will contain our code, and we type in print, which will be printing our text. We then create a set of brackets, and inside these brackets we'll have a set of double quotations. The double quotations will contain the string, as you will see when I run it. The string we're going to write between these double quotations is hello world. Now we just need to run our program. It's as simple as that. But before we run our program, you need to know there are two ways in which you can run your program. One is by clicking the play button, which you see here. As you can see, it has run our code and has printed below in the output, "Hello World." Now let's copy this line here again and show you the second way. The second way to run your code is by pressing Shift Enter. You don't want to press Enter alone, otherwise it'll just start a new line as if you were going to continue writing your code. This is a common mistake and most opt for just pressing the play button. However, as you become more advanced at programming, you'll save time by using the shortcut key Shift Enter. And while we're here, I'm going to be showing you two methods which you can already use to program with your string. So let's create the string once more. Print, a set of brackets, double quotations, hello world. What I'm going to show you now is a shortcut with the output. Let's pose a hypothetical. Supposing you want to write 2 lines with 1 section of code, or cell. Well, you would simply copy the line, paste it, and run it again. As you can see here, your hello world, it starts a new line, hello world again. However, there's a much better shortcut you can use instead of creating a second print if your text is as simple as that. So once more, we type in the line, and let's suppose we want world on a separate line. What we would then do is type in \n. \n is a shortcut key that will start a new line. When printed by pressing Shift Enter, you will notice that \n is not included. This is because Python is smart enough to know that this specific character, coupled with this backslash, means that hello world needs to be printed on 2 separate lines. However, you will notice that there is a space included after hello. This is because space is also part of the text, and the shortcut key does not include it. But let's suppose another hypothetical. Suppose you want to leave a space between hello world large enough for someone to write in. Well, what you would then use is several spaces or a tab. So, printing our line again, we can type in several spaces, or we can tab it by using 4 spaces. Notice that when something's tabbed and you press backspace, it deletes the entire tab. However, we just have 1 space for now. But suppose you want to have a tab, but you don't want to type in several spaces, because pressing tab, as you'll notice by tapping the key, it does not work. So we make use of another shortcut like the \n. \t. \t is again another shortcut term that will make a tab space between hello and world, as you can see when we print the text. And that's enough for this lesson. In this lesson alone, you have learned to write your first line of code, as well as learn 2 shortcuts when working with strings being text. At the moment these seem simple, but however these are some of the best building blocks when it comes to Python programming, and best to be kept in mind when working with data. That concludes this lesson. In the next video, we'll learn about variables and data types. Hello and welcome to your basic Python programming course for beginners. In this video, I'm going to be teaching you about variables and data types. Before we begin, let's clean up our test project for the lesson. As you can see here, you have created several cells from your previous project. As you can see here, you've created several cells from your previous lesson. What I'm going to show you how to do is delete these cells. You can, one by one, right-click on each cell and delete selected cell. However, you can also start from the top by clicking on the top line, pressing Shift and clicking up to the line you want to delete, which will select all the cells in between, and you can delete them that way, leaving you a fresh project to work with. Now that we've done that, let me tell you about the 4 data types that you'll be learning in this lesson. The first data type is one you've already worked with, a string. The string data type is text. More specifically, it is a set of characters contained within double quotations, like we saw Hello World was in the previous lesson. The second data type we'll be working with is integers. Integers are whole numbers ranging from negative infinite to positive infinite, such as 1, 2, 3, 4, or negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, etc. The third data type are floats. Floats are numbers as well, but they include decimal points, such as 3.5 or negative 6.8, and so on. And finally, the simplest but still one of the most important data types, Boolean. The Boolean data type can contain up to 3 values: true, false, or null. Null being if no value is contained. However, we'll only be working with true and false in this course. The true and false values aren't of much importance to us right now, but later in the course I'll be teaching you about specific code that makes specific use of Boolean values. However, that is getting ahead of ourselves, and let's take a look at our first data type, the string. As you know, a string is a set of characters contained within double quotations. What we're going to do now is create a variable and assign it a string value. To create a variable, you simply type in a name. For example, let's call our variable name. Notice in programming that you cannot use special terms as names for variables. This is because the Python code will then see it as executable code rather as a variable name. For example, we have here name, because this is a special term that we use to print text. For example, when we create a normal variable such as name equals, and let's give it a value of John. As simple as that, we've created a variable, name, assigned it a string value, thereby making it a string variable. Notice when I run the code, nothing happens. However, if I am to type in name and run the program again, it tells me the value contained within, John. However, if we type in print equals, you'll notice print is highlighted. This is because if we were to give a value to print, it may cause trouble later in our programming, so we won't be doing that. For now, just keep in mind that all variable names are lowercase. If your variable name is to contain 2 words or more, you will separate them with an underscore. For example, John, given to the variable name, isn't truly specific. We can then create a variable first underscore name equals John. And we can create a similar variable with the last name. Last name equals belongs. And run our program. If we were to call these variables again later on, we will then just call John or blogs, depending on which one we type. So there you have our first data type stored in a variable and some naming conventions to remember. The second variable we'll be working with is integers. So let's create a simple integer such as age equals, and let's type in a number value such as 25. And let's give it a simple value such as 25, shift enter. It works on the same principle as string. If we were to type in age again and run our program, it would tell us the value. The next data type works the same way. For example, we can say average as a variable name equals 89.6. And it's simple as that. We would call it again. We have 89.6. And our last data type we'll be working with is the Boolean data type. So let's create a Boolean variable now. Let's call this one pass underscore mark. Notice that I don't call it pass because that was highlighted green, because it is a special term in Python. Equals, and I'm going to give it the value of true. Notice that I capitalized the first letter of true, and that will be the same with false. If I want to call this again pass mark, it tells me the value as well. These are some of the simplest but also some of the most important data types you'll be working with in Python. In lessons to come, you will be learning some more advanced methods with these different data types. For example, numbers will become very important when working with loops. We will have different text methods for our strings, and we'll also be working with operators with our Boolean variables. Again, don't stress too much what operators are, you will find out when we get there. That concludes this lesson. In the next video, we'll be working with math functions with number data types. Hello and welcome to your basic Python programming course for beginners. In this video, we are going to learn how to use math functions with float and integers. First, let's go to our input cell and begin with a simple math function. 5 plus 5. When you run the program, it prints 10. Now let's speed through these basic ones first, such as 5 minus 5, 5 divided by 5, and finally 5 times 5. These are the simplest math functions that you'll be learning. Now let's take a look at two more advanced math functions. There is math function 5 mod 4. What mod or modulus does is divide the first number by the second number, and whatever remains will be printed. As you can see here, 5 divided by 4 will of course equal 1.25. However, modulus discovers how many will remain after 4 has been filled in 5. In this case, the remainder will be 1, which it is indeed. These math functions of course work with variables. So let's create two variables which will contain the numbers, such as num1, which will equal 5, num2, which will equal 10, and then we can use those together, num1 plus num2, 15. And while we're here with two variables, let me show you how overwriting works. Overwriting works as follows. We can have a variable which we created before, and we can have it equal a new value. Let's make num1 equal 15. Now, when we use the same function that we used before, num1 plus num2, it says 25, because it's 15 plus 10. This is particularly important to remember because you could also have a variable equal its value plus another variable. For example, num1 equals 1 plus num2. As we saw, it was 25. If we run this code and then decide to call num1's value, it prints 25. In this way, you can create a variable that consistently grows as the program continues. Overwriting is very important and can be used to the programmer's advantage, even though there's a misconception that data being overwritten is a bad thing. We use these kind of variables then to count how many times certain code is run for specific reasons. You'll see why this is important when we begin to work with loops. That concludes this lesson. In the next video, we will learn how to retrieve user input. Hello and welcome to your basic Python programming course for beginners. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to retrieve user input. User input is invaluable information when it comes to programming. Having the user's input on certain programs makes programs much better to work with the user as well as the programmer itself. And in some cases, it is necessary for the program to work. What I'm going to do here is show you a simple way to retrieve user input in Python. First thing I'm going to do is create a variable which is going to contain the user input. What I'm going to first do is ask the user to enter in their name, the most common input there is. So I'll create a variable, call it name, equals, and this is where I'll use the code that asks for the user's input. I type in input, a set of brackets, and in double or single quotation marks, you will ask the user to enter in your name. Of course, in the dark version, your message doesn't show as clearly as it should. As you'll notice when I press Shift Enter, our message here is too dark against the background, but highlighting it shows you that it is here. So it is asking us to enter in our name, so I'm just going to type in John. I'll press Enter, not Shift Enter, and then when I call name again and press Shift Enter, it tells me the value. Just like that, we've retrieved user input. Now let's suppose when we enter in a name we want a message displayed, such as Hello John. Well, let's create another naming variable, or just use the same one. We can go name equals input, we'll open our set of brackets, enter your name. We then create a print line, print hello space, and how we add our name after it is with a comma, and we use the variable name. So let's try Shift Enter. Now let's enter a name, and I think I'll use my real name, Matthew. Enter, and it says hello Matthew. Now let's suppose we ask the user to enter in their age. So age equals input, enter your age. When we do that, let's say we enter in the age 25, press enter. We type in age to see the value, and you see 25 is encapsulated in single quotations. That is because it has been made into a string. So if we wanted to do any math functions with it, it would only cause errors. So if we typed in age plus 5, we have an error because we're working with a string, not an integer. As you can see here, we can only add a string to a string, not an integer. In a later video, we'll be learning how to convert different data types into other data types. For now, all we need to know is how to get user input, and we've done just that. That concludes this lesson. In the next video, we'll learn about the if statement. Hello and welcome to your basic Python programming course for beginners. In this lesson, we're going to learn how to use the if statement. But before we can start working with the if statement, we're going to first learn what operators are and how we use them. Operators are special characters that we use to compare certain values with other values. A quick example would be this. 5, we use the greater than symbol. 6. As we all know, 5 is not greater to 6, so if we were to run this line, it prints false. This is an operator. Now as you know, we can also get the 5 is less than 6 as an operator, which is true, 5 is definitely less than 6. Now let's take a look at any others. You of course can get the greater than and equal to, or less than and equal to. But what about equals to? Well, the equals to works the same way but with two equal symbols. 5 equals 6. You notice it prints false. But if we have 5 equals 5, it prints true. The reason we use two equals is because the single equals in Python is used to assign a value to a variable, and that doesn't work well if you try to assign 6 to the number 5. So we use two equal symbols as an operator. So we've worked that out, but what about if something is not equals to something? So we have 5, exclamation point equals 6. If we run this line, that is true. 5 is not equal to 6. But if we try 5, exclamation point equals 5, it prints false, because 5 is equal to 5. In these ways we get a true or false or 1 or 0 value when it comes to operators. What is special about these kind of operators is we use them for if statements. So, if statements are used to create sections of code that only run depending on if the operator proves true. To better explain this, let's say an operator proves true. Anything contained in a special set of curly brackets after the if statement, any code, will be run. If the operator proves false, the code will not run. In this way we can create code that runs according to specific data. So let's create such an if statement now. Let's give a variable called num the value of 5. We'll then create an if statement that contains an operator, such as if space num is greater than 3, colon. Once we have done that, we'll open up a set of curly brackets, which will look as follows, which will contain the code. So if num is greater than 3, and let's just have a simple output, print num, print num is greater than 3. And we run our code, and the message is printed. Let's copy the code here, and change the value slightly, if num is greater than 10. Now, as we know it isn't, so this operator should prove false. So let's run the code, and you notice no message is printed this time, because the operator proved false. That is a basic if statement. We can of course work this the same way with string data, such as name equals John. We create an if statement if name equals John, colon, set of curly brackets, print he is John. If we run the code, you notice it does print exactly that. However, the problem with working with strings is that it is usually case sensitive. So let's paste the code and change JOHN with a capital J to lowercase j. If we were to run the code, you'll notice no output is printed, because our operator proved false. John is not equal to the lowercase John. Bear this in mind when accepting user data, that it may be useful to use one of our text methods to generalize the data. That we'll learn about in another video. First, however, let's continue using the if statements and move on to if-else statements. First, let me give you a clean example using the num values that we've used before. We'll paste them here. However, instead of these indented brackets over here, which are correct, I'll take away the brackets, and what I'm going to do instead is just write the line without the curly brackets. This is the old-fashioned and most reliable way of creating an if statement, as sometimes when using curly brackets it may cause errors further on. Num is greater than 3. Once we've written that, we then start next to the else, make sure the indentation is correct. You don't want to have the else below the print, you want to have it below the if. Another colon, and it will then begin its own indentation, in which we will print the default. And we'll print a message saying, num is not greater than 3. And there you have our if-else. If we run it, it'll print num is greater than 3 because it is, but if we change num's value to, let's say, 1 and rerun the program, it does the default, which is num is not greater than 3. Because the operator proves false, the else will then run the code for the false. And just like that, we've created a complex if statement that has not only its default value, but code that runs if the operator proves true. That concludes this lesson. In the next video, we will learn how to create nested if statements and use additional operators. Hello and welcome to your basic Python programming course for beginners. In this lesson, we're going to learn about additional operators and nested if statements. First, I'm going to talk to you about nested if statements. Nested if statements are if statements within if statements. As such, you can complete multiple checks to confirm which data you are looking at. For example, you have num equals 5. You want to create an if statement that checks to see if the num is between 3 and 6. So, you type in if num is greater than or equal to 3, your colon, you then type in another if num is less than or equal to 6, another colon, and there you have a nested if statement. So then you can print num, comma, space is between 3 and 6. And of course you need to create two else's to fit both of them, such as else, colon, print num is greater than 3 but greater than 6 as well. This will help specify your data, supposing you're looking for a number that you're not quite sure what it is. We create a second else for the main if statement, which will just print num is either less than 3 or greater than 6. And just like that, we've created a complex program. And as you can see, when we run it, 5 is between 3 and 6, which is correct. So that is the use of the nested if statement for completing multiple checks and making sure your data is checked as well, so that way you can have a suitable output for the data. Now let me introduce additional operators and let me show you how they can replace a nested if statement, saving you some code. I'm going to copy what I've written here, but erase this nested if statement, except for the result, which I am going to keep. So let's make sure it's in the right place. There we go. Now that we've done that, I'm going to use an additional operator to include that second operator we created in the nested if statement. I'm going to type in and num is less than and equal to 6. What the and does is make sure that both operators are true to make the following code run. If one of them is false or both of them are false, then the code will not run. So if I run this program, it says 5 is between 3 and 6, which is correct. But let's suppose I change num to equal to 3. Now that I've done that, I'm going to copy the same if statement, paste it, and run it. 10 is either less than 3 or greater than 6, which is correct. But you'll also notice that in our else statement before, using a nested if statement, we are more specific with our message, saying is greater than 3 but greater than 6 as well. What we have here is a less user-friendly form of an if statement, however it is a more efficient one. But that is only one of the additional operators I'll be showing you. The second one is the OR operator. So let me show you how it works. First, I'm going to have num equal 3. I'm going to copy the if statement here and change and to OR. Running the program, it says 3 is between 3 and 6, which seems right, but let's say I make num's value equal to 10. When I rerun the if statement, it says 10 is between 3 and 6, which we know it isn't. This is because only one of the operators is being fulfilled. So that will be the num is greater than or equal to 3. 10 is definitely greater than 3. However, it is not less than 6, but it still prints out num is between 3 and 6. So what we've created is really a redundant form of an if statement because of the OR. If one operator is fulfilled, then the code will run. Of course, there are different uses for all these operators and nested if statements. If you were to have code that only runs due to specific data, you would use a nested if statement or you would use AND. But when the data only needs to fulfill one requirement, you would use an OR additional operator, and save you the trouble of using several nested if statements. It is better to practice the use of additional operators and nested if statements to compare, so you'll know exactly when to use a nested if statement or an additional operator. But as it stands, what we have done here by using the OR additional operator is create a useless if statement. Unless we change the messages, which it doesn't really matter, because it will always fulfill at least one operator. What we have done is create a program that seeks for a number that's between negative infinite and positive infinite. And as such, the first code will always run, leaving the else to just clutter up our programming. Be sure to keep this in mind when creating your if statement so you can avoid clutter and create a more efficient program. However, in this lesson you have learned about nested if statements and additional operators, as well as received a good idea of when to use which. That concludes this lesson. In the next video, we will learn some basic text methods. Hello and welcome to your basic Python programming course for beginners. In this lesson we're going to learn some text methods. In this lesson we will learn 3 text methods are useful for checking data or changing it to suit our needs. The first text method we'll be looking at is the length method. What the length method does is measure the length of a string and tells you how many characters are contained within. So for example, I create a sample string such as word containing the word hello. If I wanted to see the length of word, I would type in len, a set of brackets, and type in the variable's name or the string that I want to scan. When I run the program, it says 5, which is correct. Hello does contain 5 characters, HELLO. It is a simple text method that we use to measure the length of names, as you'll notice with some password programs that you'll find online that you need to have a specific amount of characters before a password can be accepted. It is this method that will be used to check your password as you're typing, and until you enter in a length that's greater than a certain number, therefore it is also using an if statement that we've learned earlier, we are simply creating a simple password program with what we have learned. That is the first method. The second and third method are similar and are used to solve that problem we encountered with if statements regarding strings. The problem we encountered was this: name equals John, but supposing an if statement wants to see if the name equals lowercase j-o-h-n before it runs its code. And when we run this if statement, you'll notice nothing is printed. That is because although John and John are the same name, the second John in the operator is with a lowercase j. What we can do then, to make sure the data is uniform, is by converting the name J-O-H-N with a capital J to the lowercase, just like the rest of the letters in the operator. How we would then do this is, let's copy the if statement, paste it, and change name to name.lower, and a set of brackets. This is a special method that lowers all the characters within the string to the lowercase. So if we run this code, it says his name is John. What is often the case in most programming is all values of a string will be capitalized and they would use the upper. The upper is the second text method we'll be using. So notice here I use full caps John, and I would use dot upper, a set of brackets, and the same result when I run the program. Shift enter, his name is John. And just like that, we've created a working program that scans text to make sure it is the right value compared to the one that we are looking for. These are the 3 methods we'll be using in this course, 2 of which methods help to uniform data and another helps to create it, as such allowing us the ability to create more complex programs with such simple methods. That concludes this lesson. In the next video, we'll learn some advanced math methods. Hello and welcome to your basic Python programming course for beginners. In this lesson, I'm going to be showing you some advanced math methods. Now I've already shown you some math functions, such as multiplication, division, addition, subtraction, brackets, modulus, and so on. Well, I'm going to be showing you 4 more. Specifically, these math methods use the math object which is stored within the Python programming code. You don't need to know about objects that much, but what you need to know, however, that this is special code that comes from a program within Python. Before I even show you these 4 advanced math methods, we need to import the math object as I mentioned before. We type in import math and press Shift Enter. What this will then do is import the math class which contains all the math objects, so you'll be able to use all these methods as follows. If you do not do this, you will experience some errors when typing in math and will be identified in the error log. Now let me show you 2 math methods that we can use with floats. First, let's create a float called spec num, short for special number, and I'm going to call it 5.5. What I'm going to do next is use a math method by typing in math dot ceil, short for ceiling. Inside the brackets I'll type in spec num. What this will do is round off the first decimal point to the highest point. So when I run the program, it rounds it off to 6. Notice however, when I make spec num equal 5.4, and I use the same method, math.ceil spec num, and run the program, it still rounds it up. This isn't the math.round method, which rounds off. This is a method we use to round off to the highest. If we want to round off to the lowest, we'll use math.floor spec num. We run the program and it rounds it down to 5. Even if we were to make 5.9 and we used math.floor, it would round it down to 5. If you want to simply round off a number, then you would use the round method, but it does not partake to advanced math methods. Rounding off a number is as simple as saying round and then typing in the value, such as spec num. As you can see, it rounds 5.4 down to 5. But if I were to make spec num equal 5.9, and I were to use round again with spec num, it rounds it up to 6. If you want to be specific of what decimal place you need to round it off to, so let's say spec num equals 5.12345, and we use round spec num comma 2, it will round it off to the second decimal place. As you can see here, 5.12. It's a simple method and sometimes it isn't necessary, but it is a bonus to this lesson. The next 2 advanced math methods we'll be looking at are the sqrt and pow methods. First, the math sqrt is short for square root. So if we were to type in math.sqrt, a set of brackets, and type in 36, it will tell us the square root of 36, which is 6. A very self-explanatory method compared to the other ones we've done before. This one finds the square root but returns, as you'll notice, a float instead of an integer. This is because it also works with numbers that don't have a square root, such as math.sqrt 5. It tells you the square root of 5 in a float. With numbers such as these thrown around, the math.sqrt cannot be specific to numbers that only have square roots. It also works with numbers that don't have any clean square roots, kind of like 36. And the final advanced math method we'll be looking at is the math.pow method. Math.pow. What this does is to the power of. If you have a number that you want to the power of something, you would type it in 5, to the power of 2, which will be 5 times 5. When I run the program, it prints 25.0. This is the complete reverse of the SQRT method and is also in its way very useful. These are the 4 advanced methods I'll be showing you in this lesson. Floor and ceiling are perfect for rounding off data that doesn't have to be too specific. The bonus method, round, which doesn't partake to the math class, is also very useful for rounding off data. And finally, the SQRT and power methods are also very useful for finding the square root or power of when it comes to math data. That concludes this lesson. In the next video, we will learn about data type converting. Hello and welcome to your basic Python programming course for beginners. In this lesson, I'm going to be showing you data type conversion. Before we begin, I'm going to show you data type conversion between string, integers, and floats. So before we begin, I'm going to create an integer, call it num equals 1. I'm then going to create a second number. I'm going to call it fnum, which will be our float number, and it'll be 5.0. And finally, I'm going to create our string, which will be word equals double quotations hello. So now we have our 3 variables with 3 different types. The way we can check their types is by typing in type, a set of brackets, and the name of the variable. As you can see, num is an integer, fnum is a float, and word is a string. What we're going to do first is convert an integer to a float and string. The process is rather simple, and what you convert with can be used with other variables as well. First, let's convert an integer to a float. To convert num to a float, we first have num equal float, set of brackets, num, and we run the code. Now if we type in type num, you'll see that it's a float. If we ask the program to return num, it's 1.0. Now let's change num back to 1. So num equals 1. If we run the type program again, you can see that it has indeed changed back to an integer. So we now know how to convert an integer to a float. But how do we convert an integer to a string? Again, it is also very simple. Num equals str num. It is simple as that. Type num. As you can see, it's a string. If you ask the program to return it, you'll see that it is 1, encapsulated in quotations. As you may have already guessed, if we want to get it back to num without entering in the value, we could simply type in num equals int set of brackets num and run the code. We return the value, you'll notice it is 1, you see the type, and you'll notice it's an integer. Data type conversion is that simple, and this is very useful when asking the user to enter in their age if you plan to work with the number itself. So for example, age equals input enter your age. You'll notice that there'll be an error if the user enters in a number and we try to work with it, because it'll be a string. As you see when I run the program, I'll enter in my age of 25. And if I ask the program to print age, it prints 25 encapsulated. Type age, it's a string. We can then save ourselves time by saying age equals int, and then inside the brackets, input, enter, set of quotations, enter your age, run the program. I'll enter in 25 again, but this time when we check age, you'll see that it's an integer. A fantastic way of converting your data on the fly, especially saving your code and time. That concludes this lesson. In the next video, we'll learn about the while loop. Hello and welcome to your basic Python programming course for beginners. In this lesson, we're going to learn how to create and use a while loop. A loop is used to repeat code for a certain amount of times as long as the operator that is coupled with it proves true. In that way, it is sort of like an if statement, except the loop will continue to run until the operator proves false, where unlike the if statement, the code within will only run once. What I'm going to do is show you a basic while loop using a count variable. A count variable is an integer variable that will consistently add until the operator proves false. So I'm going to create count equals 0. Now I'll create the while loop while count is less than 10 colon enter, and the code that will follow, I'll simply just print count so we can see the values as they go. The next part of this, however, is we have to make sure we add to count, otherwise we'll create an infinite loop which will cause no doubt many errors because we are unable to stop it. Of course we can stop it in the program because we have this button over here which interrupts the kernel in which our code is running through. So how do we add to its value? We simply say count equals count plus 1. This will add 1 to count's value each time the loop is run. So let's run the loop now by pressing Shift Enter. As you can see, it prints 10 values ranging from 0 to 9. So in essence, we've created a loop that will run 10 times. So if we're inserting data 10 times of 10 different values, we would use this sort of while loop to count them all. However, while loop has the benefit of not only just using a count variable, but also using any other operator. For example, we could create a while loop that will run until the user enters in stop. So for example, let's create a string and call it name equals, and we'll just say double quotations for now. What we'll do next is create while name is not equal to stop full uppercase colon enter. We'll then ask the user to give name a value. Name equals input enter a name. We could print name as the output, so that'll be name, and with that as the output we have created our program. But as before, when using the text methods, we need to uniform the data. So we try name.upper brackets to make sure when the user enters in stop, it is the full uppercase version. So let's test out this while loop. It's asking us to enter the name, so I'll enter in John. Notice John is printed and we're still entering in values. Max, Lucy, and so on, until we enter in the full stop. Notice it'll print stop, and then it won't ask us any more. In this way it is a messy while loop, because we are printing a value that shouldn't be printed. This could easily be solved by simply copying the line and pasting it below. So that way it'll check before it even prints. So let's rerun the program again by pressing Shift Enter. Max is printed. Lucy is printed. John is printed, but when I type in stop, let's make it a messy stop with some uppercase and lowercase letters. Our method works and it doesn't print stop. Bear in mind though when using this again, because now name has the value of stop. So if we try to run the program once more, you'll notice that it doesn't work because it's instantly stopped. So we need to run this cell's code once more by pressing Shift Enter, and then rerunning this one by pressing Shift Enter as well. Max, stop. And the program stops. And that is the while loop. It can be used in many ways to have a loop that will run indefinitely until a certain value reaches a certain point. Whether it be checking if the user enters in a certain stop code, or if a number reaches a certain value. That concludes this lesson. In the next video, we'll learn about the for loop. Hello and welcome to your basic Python programming course for beginners. In this lesson, we're going to learn how to create and use a for loop. A for loop is a more complex form of loop. However, it is unlike the while loop in the way that it runs using a count variable. But how it uses a count variable is unique in its own way compared to the while loop as well. What a for loop does is create its own personal variable and then runs in range from a certain number to another number. In other words, you can create a very specific for loop that doesn't depend on whether an operator proves true or false, but rather a more specific way in which you can say how many times a loop will run. How you will create a for loop is as follows. For num is our example variable, in, and now we make use of a method known as range. We open up a set of brackets, and if we want to create a loop that runs 10 times, we go from 0 to 10. Once we've done that, we'll open our loop with a colon, enter, and let's say print num. When we run the code, it prints 0 to 9. In other words, we've created now a loop that runs 10 times. Of course, you can always fiddle with this. You can create a for loop that doesn't use range, such as for num in, and we create a set of brackets 0, 1, 2, 5, as many as you would like, colon, print num. It prints all the values contained within. So as you can see, there are 4 values, but it makes use of the specific values we used, instead of 0, 1, 2, 3. It is far better then to make use of the range for your for loop. This way you can set how many times it runs. So working on the program we created previously in the last lesson, we're going to be asking the user to enter in, let's say, 5 values. To create that loop, for num in range. So there we now have a loop that will run 5 times. So as you can see, a for loop is far more basic compared to that of a while loop. However, it is much more useful in the common sense. You'll be using more for loops than you will be using while loops. Because when it comes to checking data and programming, the programmer tries to avoid checking data as much as possible, rather relying on more solid, reliable numbers. So keep this in mind when deciding what kind of loop to use. Should you use a while or for loop? If it is a simple program, most likely you're going to be using a for loop. That concludes this lesson. In the next video, we'll be discussing the project for this course. Hello and welcome to your basic Python programming course for beginners. In this lesson, we'll be discussing the project for this course. For this project, you are to create a program called age check. In this program, you'll be asking the user 3 times to enter in a name and then an age. In total, there should be 3 names and 3 ages assigned to each. After this, you must check if the age is 18 or higher. If the age is 18 or higher, you shall print the name. If not, you shall not print the name. If there are 2 or more names that are 18 or higher, the names should be printed one under each other. If the name is 17 or less, then you shall print an X instead. The same rule applies. If you have written a name that is 18 or higher and a name that isn't, you shall have the name and then beneath it an X. At the end of the program, you should tell the user how many passed the age check by having an age of 18 or higher. This should be done in a simple output saying the number of how many are higher and a text saying made it into the program. Here is an example of an output. John, below it is an X, below that is an X, and finally it ends off with text saying 1 made it into the program. Here are some tips to help you get started. First, use a for loop to go through the 3 entries. Secondly, you need to check the age with an if statement. Third, you need to use a string variable to contain the output to finally print it at the end. And fourth and finally, use a count variable to keep track of how many made it into the program. And that is the project for this course. I wish you good luck with your programming, and I'll see you in the next video to give you one of the ways in which you can answer this project. Hello and welcome to your basic Python programming course for beginners. In this lesson, I'm going to be giving you one of the ways you can answer this course's project. Before we begin, we of course have to create our project. We go to Python Notebook in our launcher. We rename it to the file that stated in the previous video, age check. Once we have done that, we can begin coding. We are going to create the 4 variables that we'll be working with. The first is the count variable, which will keep count of how many applicants made it into the program. Next, we will create the result variable, which will contain the names. Double quotations for now. Then the age variable, which will contain the age. And finally the name variable, which will contain the names that the user enters. With those created, we can now move on to the for loop. The for loop will look as follows. For num in range, then a set of brackets 0, 3. So we have a loop that runs 3 times. From there we have name equal input, and asking the user to enter a name. Then we have age equals int, because we have to convert the string to an integer, another set of brackets, enter an age. With that done, we create an if statement which will check the age. If age is greater than or equal to 18, result equals result plus name, which will add the name, and as stated in the previous video, we also need to add a new line, which is as follows. Before we even move on to the else, we need to add 1 to the count, so it's count equals count plus 1. Moving on to the else now, we've dealt with if the user enters in a name that is 18 or higher. We need one for lower. Result equals result plus capitalized X \n to start the new line. And that is our for loop. So let's run the program and insert all our values. Shift Enter. Enter in a name such as, next we enter in a name such as John, and it's given the age of 18. Next let's enter a name such as Lucy, give her an age of 25. And now let's look below the mark and enter in Max with an age of 17. Now that we've done that, all our values have been imported into the result variable. We need to print the results. So let's print result. We will then start a new line. Count. And again, a message saying has made it into the program. We run this code, and there we have it. John, Lucy, and X. John was 18, Lucy was 25, so they both made it into the program, but Max was 17, so his name has been replaced by an X. Below it we have our final output. 2 has made it into the program, which is correct. John and Lucy have made it into the program. And there you have one of the ways in which you can answer this course's project. If you struggled creating this project, I recommend taking a look at the answer I've written here and seeing what differences you can make. However, if you have succeeded and have done it in more lines, see if you can simplify your project more. And finally, if you succeeded and perhaps even have the same or less lines of code than I do, then congratulations, you have completed this course's project with flying colors. In the next video, I'll conclude what you have learned in this course. Hello and congratulations, you have completed your basic course on Python programming. And if you've completed your project, you have just about mastered the basics, building a firm foundation of Python programming. As lead instructor at Programming Tut, I found that practicing what you have learned is a great way to advance. And hopefully, doing this project in this course has helped you do just that, advance your programming skills to a level beyond where you started. On top of that, I hope the project was enjoyable and didn't prove too much of a challenge. With that in mind, you have made it to the end of your Python course, so I can say with confidence that you now have a head start in your Python programming. From the start of this course, you knew little to nothing about Python programming, finally ending off with some key foundation points that build any advanced Python programmer. You know how to ask for input, you know how variables work, you know how to convert data to information, you know output, you know loops, you know how to check data. With all this information in mind, it's safe to say that you are experienced with Python programming and are ready for more advanced studies. With these basics in mind, they help prevent some more common struggles that you will face in your studies. Thank you for taking this course and good luck with your Python programming.